What if everything we've been taught about the dawn of civilization is fundamentally wrong? What if our ancestors were building architectural marvels thousands of years before they should have even known how to farm? Welcome to Forbidden Fathoms, where we dive into the mysteries that challenge everything we thought we knew about our past. Today, we're exploring a discovery so profound, so impossibly ancient, that it has forced scientists to completely rewrite the timeline of human achievement. This is the story of a temple complex that shouldn't exist, built by people who weren't supposed to have the knowledge, the tools, or the organization to create it. Stay with us until the end, because what we've uncovered will change the way you see human history forever. Buried within the mountainous terrain of Turkey's southeastern region lies an elevated formation that challenges every scientific expectation. For multiple decades, the Ceres mountain chain was written off by specialists as nothing more than a desolate expanse of chalky rock and arid soil. However, contemporary archaeological digs have uncovered evidence beneath the surface, a finding of such monumental proportions that it has completely overturned our comprehension of prehistoric societies. Traditional historical narratives have consistently informed us that advanced culture originated with agricultural implements and cultivated grains. Yet at this location, we discover colossal stone blocks weighing multiple tons alongside exceptional construction techniques, manifesting almost 2 millennia prior to humanity's development of farming practices. This represents an archaeological location that violates the accepted principles of chronological development, a phantom presence within the framework of human evolution that demonstrates our forebears were constructing larger structures at earlier dates with greater complexity than previously imagined possible. During the year 1994, a German archaeological researcher named Klaus Schmidt positioned himself atop a high point surveying the Harran flatlands when he experienced a startling revelation. He was standing upon a manufactured elevation. While earlier archaeological assessments had rejected this mound as merely a burial ground from medieval times based on the abundance of worked flint and fractured limestone scattered across its surface, Schmidt recognized the unmistakable indicators of something far more ancient. This elevation wasn't a naturally occurring geological feature, but represented the visible portion of an immense megalithic structure that had been deliberately concealed beneath earth by human effort. When the initial excavation ditches were opened, the true nature of this location became increasingly apparent. Schmidt exposed the upper section of an enormous T-configured column, flawlessly geometric and sculpted with the skill level of an expert stonemason. This marked the beginning of the Göbekli Tepe excavation, a revelation that would fundamentally challenge the conventional historical narrative. To comprehend why this archaeological find generated such tremendous reverberations throughout the academic community, we must examine the foundational historical framework that has been instructed across generations. Throughout more than 100 years, the accepted paradigm of human advancement followed a straightforward linear trajectory. We were instructed that across hundreds of millennia, humans existed as basic hunter-gatherers surviving in small wandering groups. According to this established theory, everything transformed approximately 10,000 years in the past when humanity allegedly learned the techniques of cultivating wheat and barley within the Fertile Crescent region. This agricultural revolution led to stationary communities, which generated the nutritional abundance required to finally construct religious structures and establish intricate social systems. This grain before gathering places hypothesis maintains that civilization emerged as a consequence of agricultural development, operating under the assumption that monumental architecture cannot exist without bakeries to sustain the construction workforce. This comfortable logical sequence appeared reasonable, but the archaeological evidence emerging from the stone-covered hills of Turkey indicates we have been interpreting the narrative of our own species backwards. We believe that the initial massive stone constructions like Stonehenge or the Egyptian pyramids represented the pinnacle of thousands of years of agricultural prosperity. Under this outdated framework, a community of hunters constructing a megalithic sanctuary would be equivalent to primitive cavemen attempting to engineer a spacecraft. It simply wasn't regarded as a feasible possibility within the understood spectrum of human capabilities during that time period. We were educated that social stratification and occupational specialization only emerged after populations began residing in urban centers. Yet these ancient remains communicate a completely different story. The moment of undeniable truth materialized when the radiocarbon dating analysis for the deepest archaeological layers of the location were completed. The determined date was 600 BCE. To provide proper context for this time frame, this represents more than 11.5 millennia ago. During this historical moment, the planet was a fundamentally altered environment. The British Isles remained physically joined to continental Europe through an extensive land connection called Doggerland, and the woolly mammoth continued to exist as a living creature. According to virtually every educational textbook, humans throughout this epoch were utilizing basic flint cutting tools and dwelling in temporary animal hide shelters. They were presumably battling to endure the final stages of a worldwide glacial period. Yet the tangible archaeological evidence confirms they were extracting from quarries, relocating and positioning limestone columns that reached masses of 20 tons. This revelation demands more than a simple modification to the historical calendar. We are examining a culture that was sculpting elaborate three-dimensional artwork into solid rock prior to the creation of the wheel, the identification of metallic elements, or the emergence of agricultural practices. The archaeological site contains 0 residential structures, no refuse deposits filled with household debris, and no indicators of farming activity. The population who constructed this complex were hunters subsisting on wild gazelle. Yet they possessed the engineering expertise to relocate stone blocks that would challenge contemporary crane machinery. The accumulated data indicates that a collective belief system or an enormous communal undertaking preceded agricultural development, not emerging as a consequence of it. The chronological timing of this construction makes the historical anomaly even more challenging to dismiss. The year 600 BCE corresponds precisely with the termination of the Younger Dryas period, an interval of sudden and severe climatic transformations. The planet had been trapped in a 1,200-year cold period before global temperatures abruptly increased again. This was an era of worldwide instability and massive environmental disruption. The choice to construct at this location contradicted what the climatic conditions should have permitted. Typically, when environmental circumstances are chaotic, humans retreat to fundamental concerns of nutrition and protection. They do not dedicate decades relocating mountainous quantities of stone to an elevated ridge where water sources are absent and natural defensive features don't exist. This undertaking suggests these populations were motivated by something substantially more powerful than the pursuit of caloric intake. They were constructing a physical foundation point in a world that was literally thawing and transforming around them. The magnitude of this work is absolutely staggering. Calculations suggest that to relocate even a single 10-ton pillar from the adjacent quarrying sites would demand a synchronized effort of no fewer than 500 individuals. To provide sustenance for that quantity of laborers across the years required to construct each enclosed area requires an organizational planning capability that we didn't believe humans possessed for another 5,000 years. They were emerging from a global catastrophe and immediately constructing monuments that would remain unparalleled in scope and exactness until the emergence of ancient Egyptian civilization. If advanced culture did not originate with agricultural development, then the complete foundation of our historical comprehension is fractured. It implies that the beginning of our species' story occurred much earlier, potentially during the Ice Age itself, and that Göbekli Tepe is not the commencement of something novel, but the final refined resonance of a vanished world. As we progress deeper into the excavated enclosures, the evidence becomes even more persuasive. We are discovering that Göbekli Tepe was a component of a more extensive regional system of elevated sites, each containing its own megalithic mysteries. The ramifications are unmistakable. We are not the first sophisticated society to inhabit this planet. We are merely the most recent. To comprehend how they accomplished it, we must examine more closely the physical ruins themselves, beginning with the impossible engineering discovered inside the central chambers. When you enter the central enclosures of these stone hills, the initial impression that overwhelms you is the pure mathematical improbability of the constructed space. We aren't observing a simple arrangement of rocks. We're observing a deliberate, intricate architectural system that appears to have materialized from nothing. The central pillars in Enclosure D, for instance, aren't simply positioned in the earth. They are secured into pedestals carved directly from the living bedrock foundation. The builders weren't just relocating heavy objects. They were integrating their constructions into the geological structure of the mountain itself. This requires a planning capability that extends far beyond a seasonal gathering of nomadic groups. It implies a master blueprint, a schematic that was followed with clinical exactness across multiple generations. The stonework here also doesn't correspond with the implements we previously assumed available during the pre-pottery Neolithic period. We've always presumed that without metallic tools, humans were restricted to crude, removal-based methods. But the raised relief sculptures discovered on these pillars suggest a substantially more sophisticated procedure. Consider Pillar 27. It displays a predatory animal, probably a leopard, launching downward along the side of the stone. This wasn't scratched onto the surface. The craftsman removed centimeters of the surrounding limestone to leave the creature protruding in 3 dimensions. This is a removal technique that requires an extraordinary amount of patience and advanced visualization. If you make a single error with a stone hammer, the entire artwork is destroyed. The reality that we observe this caliber of artistry across dozens of pillars suggests that these people had advanced past the experimental phase of stone masonry thousands of years earlier. Beyond the artwork, there exists a chemical anomaly concealed underfoot. In multiple enclosures, the ground surfaces are constructed of a substance called terrazzo. This is a composite material made of heated lime and pulverized limestone. To manufacture burnt lime, you must heat limestone to temperatures surpassing 800 degrees Celsius for multiple days. This isn't something that occurs accidentally in a campfire. It demands a dedicated kiln and a consistent high-energy fuel source. The outcome is a water-resistant, durable floor surface that appears almost like modern concrete. The decision to utilize this specific material suggests that the builders weren't just concerned with the aesthetic appearance of the temple. They were focused on its permanence and its capacity to withstand environmental elements. It's a piece of chemical engineering that wouldn't be witnessed again at this scale until the Roman Empire. The pillars themselves present another engineering challenge. Some stand nearly 18 feet tall and weigh upwards of 20 tons. In a world without pulley systems or domesticated beasts of burden, the logistics of moving these blocks from the nearby quarries some hundreds of meters distant is a massive undertaking. We frequently hear the explanation of rope and roller systems, but that theory begins to collapse when you consider the landscape. The site is positioned on a steep, rocky ridge. Moving a 20-ton slab up a limestone slope requires a level of coordinated labor and mechanical leverage that we simply don't associate with hunter-gatherer societies. It requires a specialized class of engineers who understood weight distribution and physics long before those concepts were ever documented into written texts. The sheer scale of the stone extraction is another point that is frequently overlooked. To create the enclosures, the builders had to quarry out thousands of cubic meters of limestone. We can still observe the negative impressions in the surrounding plateaus where these pillars were created. They weren't just collecting loose rocks, they were mining the mountain. Some of the incomplete pillars still remaining in the quarry are even larger than those in the temples, with one measuring nearly 24 feet in length. The decision to abandon these giants mid-carving suggests a sudden shift in priorities, or perhaps a recognition that even their advanced techniques had a physical limitation. What makes this architecture so anomalous is the absence of a learning curve in the stratigraphic record. Usually when we examine the chronology of a site, we observe a progression from simple to complex. We expect to see crude, small stones at the bottom, archaeological layers, and larger, more polished work at the top as the culture develops. At these stone hills, the opposite is true. The oldest enclosures, the ones buried deepest, are the largest and most sophisticated. The masonry is finer, the pillars are bigger, and the artistic detail is more refined. As we move up into the later layers, the quality actually begins to deteriorate. The pillars become smaller, the enclosures become more rectangular, and the carvings lose their three-dimensional depth. It's as if the culture arrived at the site with their highest level of knowledge already complete, and then slowly lost the capability to maintain it over the following 2,000 years. This regression is a massive warning sign for historians. It suggests that Göbekli Tepe wasn't the birthplace of civilization, but rather a zenith or a final monument for a culture that was already in decline. It implies that the genuine origin of this architectural style exists even further back in time, concealed in a layer of history that we haven't excavated yet. If they didn't acquire these skills on this ridge, then where did they originate? The precision of the stone connections and the chemical complexity of the floors point toward a tradition of masonry that must have taken thousands of years to develop. We are looking at the finished product, but the workshop is missing. The enclosures also feature astronomical alignments that suggest a profound understanding of the cosmos. Several researchers have identified that the central pillars seem to be oriented towards specific star systems such as Sirius or the constellation of Orion. While this remains a subject of debate among mainstream archaeologists, the mathematical probability of these pillars aligning with major celestial events by pure chance is remarkably low. If these sites were intended as observatories, it adds another layer of specialized knowledge to the builder's skill set. Not only were they master masons and chemists, but they were also astronomers who were tracking the movement of the heavens with scientific precision. The decision to build here contradicted what the climate should have allowed. As the world was exiting the Younger Dryas, resources were scarce and the weather was unpredictable. Yet the investment in these structures was total. They weren't building shelters for people. They were building monuments for concepts. The enclosures are intentionally semi-subterranean, carved into the slope of the hill, which would have made them incredibly difficult to excavate, but very stable once completed. Every choice made by the builders, from the selection of stone to the orientation of the pillars, reflects a high level of intentionality. This wasn't a project born of necessity. It was a project born of a specific, complex vision that we are only just beginning to decode. As we examine the sheer physical mass of these structures, it becomes impossible to categorize the builders as simple hunters. They were a society that had mastered the art of shaping the world to fit their beliefs. They understood the properties of stone, the mechanics of weight, and the chemistry of the earth. But as we expand our perspective beyond this single ridge, we find that they weren't alone. For years following its discovery, the scientific community treated Göbekli Tepe as a singular anomaly. It was framed as an isolated miracle of history, a lone temple built by a freakishly talented group of hunters who vanished as quickly as they appeared. But that narrative changed in 2021 with the formal launch of the Tatapala project. This massive archaeological survey revealed that the stone hills were not a single point of interest, but a vast interconnected network of at least 12 different sites scattered across the Harran Plain. We are no longer looking at one temple. We are looking at a regional civilization that operated with a unified architectural and symbolic language. Sites like Karahan Tepe, Harbetsuvan Tipisi, and Sefer Tip proved that this was a coordinated, industrial-scale effort to reshape the landscape of Anatolia. The realization that Göbekli Tepe was just one component in a larger machine fundamentally shifts our understanding of the pre-pottery Neolithic period. This wasn't the work of a few rogue bands of hunters. A network this size requires a massive, sustained population and a sophisticated logistical web to move resources and people between these types of sites. Each location seems to have served a specific purpose, creating a geography of the sacred that spanned hundreds of square miles. This regional focus suggests a level of territorial control and social complexity that we previously thought was reserved for the great empires of the Bronze Age. The stone hills were a heartland of human activity at a time when the rest of the world was supposedly silent. Perhaps the most striking evidence of this coordinated society is found at Karahan Tip, located about 23 miles east of Göbekli Tepe. This site features similar T-shaped pillars, but the architecture takes a darker, more theatrical turn. Archaeologists uncovered a specialized chamber carved directly into the bedrock, now famously known as the Chamber of the Phallus. Inside, 11 standing pillars are shaped like phalluses, surrounding a larger, more imposing central stone. Carved into the wall of this chamber is a human head with a serpentine neck staring directly into the space. This wasn't a room for gathering. It was a room for an experience. The layout of Karahan Tip reveals a processional design that is unsettlingly deliberate. The architecture was engineered to channel people through specific stone narrowings, forcing them to move in a predetermined path before entering the ritual chambers. This implies a highly organized ritualistic society with a strict sense of hierarchy and ceremony. You didn't just walk into these spaces, you were led. The Chamber of the Phallus even features a channel for liquid, suggesting that rituals involving water, blood, or some other substance were central to the experience. This level of theatrical engineering shows that these people were masters of psychological space, using stone to dictate human behavior 10,000 years before the first cathedrals were built. In 2021, the narrative changed again with the discovery at Seyburt. Excavators uncovered a narrative relief carved into the back wall of a communal building depicting a central male figure flanked by two leopards. To his left, another scene shows a man facing a bull with its horns lowered. This is a cinematic sequence frozen in limestone dated to approximately 9000 BCE. Unlike the isolated symbols found at other sites, these figures are interacting in a clear sequential story. The central figure is carved in high relief, shown grasping his own phallus, a recurring motif of vitality and lineage found throughout the stone hills. The leopards are shown in profile with their mouths open and teeth bared, creating a sense of tension and physical threat. The anatomical accuracy and the use of the stone's depth to create a sense of perspective suggests that by this point, the artistic tradition was already mature. This isn't the beginning of an art form. It is a refined execution of an established style. The Seyburt discovery proves that the Taftapella sites weren't just functional or ritual spaces. They were repositories for a complex shared mythology. This was a civilization that used the bedrock of the Harran Plain to record specific narratives that were meant to be permanent. By mapping these stories across all 12 sites, we see a consistent symbolic language. They were using high-relief masonry to document a worldview that survived for thousands of years long after the people who carved them had disappeared. But to truly understand the people who inhabited these stone hills, we have to look past the art and the architecture and confront the brutal reality of how they actually survived on this ridge. Building a monument is one thing. Keeping the builders alive in a desert is another entirely. When we examine the logistics of the stone hills, the mathematics behind the labor force creates a massive scientific problem. To quarry, move, and erect a single 20-ton pillar, you need more than just a few strong hands. You need a coordinated team of hundreds. Conservative estimates suggest that at any given time, thousands of people were involved in the construction and maintenance of these sites. This raises a fundamental caloric question: how were these people fed? In 9600 BCE, there were no grain silos, no domesticated cattle, and no organized agriculture to provide a steady food supply. The discovery of tens of thousands of animal bones, primarily wild gazelle and aurochs, suggests a massive, industrial-scale hunting effort. This wasn't casual foraging. It was a highly organized catering operation that functioned like a military supply chain to keep a massive workforce active on a waterless ridge. The sheer volume of meat required to sustain such a population implies that the builders were not just hunters but master tacticians of the landscape. They would have needed to coordinate large-scale drives, perhaps funneling entire herds into traps to provide the surplus needed for the workers. This creates a caloric crisis for the standard historical model. We are seeing a society with the logistic complexity of an agricultural civilization, but without the actual agriculture. It suggests that a high level of social organization, the kind that allows for specialized labor and massive communal projects, didn't actually require farming to exist. The builders of the stone hills proved that a shared ideology could organize a population just as effectively as a wheat field. Perhaps the most unsettling anomaly found at these sites is the direction of their technological progress. We are taught that human skill follows a linear path from simple to complex, yet the stratigraphic record in Turkey tells the opposite story. At Göbekli Tepe, the oldest enclosures, the ones buried deepest in the hill, are the largest and most sophisticated. These Layer 3 structures feature the most massive pillars and the highest quality three-dimensional carvings. As we move up into the later layers, the quality begins to noticeably decline. The pillars in the younger enclosures are smaller, the masonry is cruder, and the artistic detail becomes flat and abstract. The knowledge was not growing. It was being lost. This skill regression is a massive red flag for researchers. It contradicts the idea that these people were learning as they went. Instead, it appears they arrived at the site with their highest level of knowledge already intact, only for that knowledge to slowly degrade over the following 2,000 years. This suggests that the stone hills were not the birthplace of this architectural style, but rather the final peak of a much older tradition that is yet to be found. If the builders were losing their grip on their own technology as time went on, It implies we are looking at the survivors of a more advanced era, trying to preserve what they had left, rather than a primitive culture inventing something new. The final mystery of the stone hills is not how they were built, but how they were abandoned. These sites were not destroyed by an invading army or leveled by an earthquake. Instead, they were meticulously and intentionally buried. Evidence shows that hundreds of tons of clean fill consisting of limestone, rubble, and bone were brought in to cover the enclosures from top to bottom. This backfilling process was a massive engineering project in its own right, requiring almost as much effort as the original construction. The builders were effectively turning their temples into artificial hills, sealing them away from the world with a level of care that suggests they wanted these structures to remain untouched for eternity. The question of why they chose to bury their greatest achievements remains one of the most debated topics in archaeology. Some suggest the sites were retired as part of a ritual cycle, while others believe they were being hidden from a perceived threat or a changing world. By burying the enclosures, the people of the stone hills ensured that their work would survive the elements for over 10,000 years. They created a megalithic mystery that waited in total darkness until Klaus Schmidt finally pulled back the dirt in 1994. What we've uncovered at these stone hills isn't just an archaeological curiosity. It's a fundamental challenge to everything we thought we knew about human civilization. These weren't primitive people stumbling toward progress. These were sophisticated builders, astronomers, and engineers who possessed knowledge that would be lost for millennia. If this story has opened your eyes to the mysteries still buried beneath our feet, then join us here at Forbidden Fathoms as we continue to explore the hidden chapters of human history. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the mysteries that textbooks won't tell you. Share this video with anyone who questions the official narrative of our past. Leave a comment below and tell us, what do you think happened to the civilization that built these temples? Were they preserving knowledge from an even older world? The evidence is there, waiting beneath the surface. Here at Forbidden Fathoms, we're committed to bringing these hidden truths to light. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, history is far stranger than we've been told.